and often did not. And so what would happen is they give them the reports, and they may or may not implement the recommendations. Those that did had healthier camps. Those that didn't continue to have problems with sick men.
Oh.
So pretty quick, everybody's following the recommendations of the Sanitary Commission. Well, that's what one part of the organization's doing. Meanwhile, we have other people that are home looking around, and they realize that there is a need to solve another problem. Communities wanted to send things to their men in the camps. They wanted to send clothing, they wanted to send food. And so they would gather it together and put it in railroad cars. Well, realized the women didn't know anything about military life, they didn't know anything about camp life. So they would send food typical of what they'd make for dinner that night. So they're sending...
moldy stuff?
Oh, they're sending eggs, cheese, milk, you name it, they were sending it. And they'd load them in the railroad cars. And maybe the railroad car would get to camp. Well, realize these railroad cars had no priority with the military, so they get sidetracked.
Wow.
For 2 to 3 weeks. And in the hot summer sun, by the time they reached the camps, they'd open them up and the stench was just overpowering. And there was nothing that they could salvage out of it, so they just shovel it all out. So the Sanitary Commission stepped in and said, hey, we can do something better about this. And so they created 10 distribution centers across the north. And the communities would send the things to the distribution centers where they'd be unpacked, sorted, repacked, and they'd be at a station like this within 3 days.
Oh.
The reason we could do it so quickly is we had our own railroad cars that had USSC across the side of it. And the military, knowing what was in those railroad cars, would pick them up with the military trains and take them and drop them off at the camps as they went by. So we would get things much quicker than the military could.
Oh, sounds like the beginnings of the Red Cross or something, huh?
Well, actually, there is a connection. Clara Barton was involved with the United States Sanitary Commission. She was one of the nurses. That's one of the things that we do supply, is we supply nurses. She, however, I understand, had some problems with some of the organization. This was one of those things that they weren't getting everything right. But she did take a lot of the ideas, and then when she started the American Red Cross, which is about 15 years after the war, she implemented a lot of the recommendations and the things that the United States Sanitary Commission did. Because prior to this, they had never done things like this. And so the Sanitary Commission was creating things to meet needs as they were coming up. And because of that, they didn't always get it right, but they really had a very significant impact, because they wound up supplying nurses, they wound up supplying transports to transport men from near where the battlefield happened to farther north to the hospitals. They provide a collection and distribution system so hospitals could get things the military normally wouldn't supply. They would also they provided employment for women that had lost their husbands and still needed to be able to earn a wage. They'd get them to sew the shirts and they pay them. And they also wound up doing fundraising just to support this whole organization, because they got no money from the government or from the military. And so they had to rely totally on donations. So they go into fundraising, and they start doing what's called a sanitary fair. And the very first sanitary fair was in Chicago, and they wanted to raise $25,000. The fair lasts 2 weeks, they raised $100,000.
Wow.
And because of that, everybody starts having sanitary fairs. The biggest and most lavish is in New York. It lasts well over a month, and they raise over $2 million.
Nowadays? Or
that's
back then?
That's
wow,
their money.
Wow.
So at the end of the war, they will have raised over $4 million. They will have collected and distributed over $60 million in goods and services.
Wow.
And that's pretty impressive when you think about this is an organization that wasn't supposed to accomplish anything.
Yeah.
And they really proved what some very dedicated, very tenacious volunteers can do and have a significant impact. I have read estimates where they figure they would have lost 50% more to illness than they did if the Sanitary Commission hadn't been in the hospitals making the difference they had.
Well, thanks a lot for all the information.
Oh, you're welcome.
Pretty good, pretty informative. Was there anything else you were going to say, or?
Oh, well, you can look around our camp. A lot of the things you'll find, it's like we have the type of things for a sick diet. that the military wouldn't have supplied. So we have canned
whiskey.
Yeah, we have whiskey. You know, the men liked at night they would get their milk punch, a cup of milk punch. Milk punch being nothing more than milk and whiskey. And the men would be really upset if they did not get their milk punch because it made them feel so much better.
Oh yeah, I betcha.
So we definitely have the whiskey. We have things to entertain the men because they would be in bed sometimes from 3 to 6 months.
Wow.
And so they need something to do. So we have newspapers over here. We have things that have been donated to us, and they have written notes, and we just pass those on to the people to the soldiers.
Oh, well.
And we also have a newspaper if you'd like to have a newspaper.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks a lot. This is informative, and the YouTubers will like that.
Oh.
Okay.